All right, so I want to start talking about Parshas Ekev, this week's Parsha. So it's an interesting Nakuda. I want to go through Shtikl Arachaim HaKadosh over here at the beginning of the Parsha that tries to understand what the first pasuk is. So let's read the pasuk. Let's try to get an understanding of what the Torah is telling us. V'hoya Ekev Tishmun Eis HaMishpatim Ha'ela U'Shmartem V'Asisem Oisam V'Shamar Hashem Alekecha L'choes Habris V'Es HaChesed Asher Nishba L'Avisecha. And it will be that if you will listen to the mishpatim and you'll smart them, you'll guard them, you'll keep them properly, and you'll do the mitzvahs. Hashem will, Rashi says, Yishma lecha haftachasai. Hashem will keep his haftacha. Hashem will keep his haftacha that he was maftiach to you, the chesed that he swore, he made a shvua l'aveisecha. So before we even start anything, I just want to speak out of Lashon. I heard from our Shivas, Al-Gazinsa and James and David, that we refer to somebody as a Shomer Torah Mitzvahs. He said this in regard to the Lashon in the Haggadah Shel Pesach, Baruch Shomer Haftachasei L'Yisrael. Blessed is he, whatever that's supposed to mean, or Makar HaBracha is the one that's Shomer his Haftacha for Klal Yisrael. A couple of weeks ago, Parshas Matos, and we learned in Parshas Matos all the halachas on the Dorim and Shavuos. Every kid knows that if you make a neder, you make a shvu, you got to keep it, right? Even if a kid says, "I promise you, I'm going to give you 500 bags of popcorn," right? He made a promise. He got to keep his word, right? So HaKadosh Baruch Hu, first of all, the Yerushalmi says in Rosh Hashanah that HaKadosh Baruch Hu keeps all the mitzvahs. Yeah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu can't tell us to keep the mitzvahs and doesn't keep them himself, right? So all kinds of questions. How does Hashem make it rain on Shabbos? Because then it's like watering their grass. All kinds of interesting questions that come up because of that. But that's besides the point. So the question is, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of course, is going to keep the Havtacha that he gave to Klal Yisrael, that he gave to the others. What's the tzadna? So pshat is that maybe HaKadosh Baruch Hu is, reaffirming his Havtacha. That's the pashtus. But he said a very interesting pshat. And he based it off a Rashi in Parshas Boy, and it's like this. There's something called Leil Shimurim. Yeah? What's Leil Shimurim? So the Gemara says in Rosh Hashanah that it's Mishumar Ubamin HaMazikim, that there's not going to be Mazikim there, so you keep the door open, and you only say the first Parsha of Shema. So the question is why you say the first Parsha of Shema. A person is not supposed to go to sleep the night of the Seder anyways. He should darshan the Haggadah and CPTs with Charm until he falls asleep. So what do you need to say Shema for? So some say it is a kasha, some say it's not a kasha. But I'll call upon him, it says here in the pasuk that it's Leil Shimurim. So what does Rashi say in Leil Shimurim? See where it went. It used to be here. So it's Laila Shemeshumar Ubam and Amazikim. What does Meshumer mean? So Rashi gives a whole drush over there. Rashi says, that the pshat is that Shahoya HaKadosh Baruch Hu Shomer U'Mitzap Mosai Yiskayim Haftachosai. HaKadosh Baruch Hu was sitting with great anticipation, waiting for the time to be Mekayim the Havtacha. So Shimurim doesn't mean, Leil Shimurim doesn't mean a night of watching. It means a night of anticipation. What was the great anticipation? Because this was the night that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave his Havtacha to Klal Yisrael, to the others that he's going to take them out of Mitzrayim. So now it came the time. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu was very excited, so to speak, to be Mekayim that. So, when the Torah says Leil Shimurim, it means it was a night of anticipation. Shomor doesn't mean to watch. What does it mean that Hashem is watching? Hashem is always watching. It's not a question, right? But that's the pshat over here. And see, he said very good. He said that's the pshat that we say that a person is a shomer Torah mitzvahs. He says it's not the pshat that a person keeps the mitzvahs. We spoke all the time that when you come up to Shemayim, they're not going to bring you a checklist. Okay, let's go through Siman Aleph for Shulchan Aruch. What were you Mekayim? A lot of it has to do with Rahman Aliba boy. It's how you were Mekayim, as we're going to speak in a minute. It's very much how you do things. It's very much the attitude and the hashkafa. And it's not necessarily the physical action of the mitzvahs that we do. And that's very much the pshad in being shomer. So that I want to tell that too to the pasuk of Yehovaya Eikav Tishmun Samishpatam Ma'ele Ushmartam Lasoisam Vasisam Oisam V'Shomar Hashem Alekecha Sabris Sechesed Asher Nishba Lavaisecha. Why is this important? So Rashi says here, the second Rashi says the Yishmar L'Chavtachasa Hashem is going to be Mekayim Mizavtacha. Okay, but the first Rashi says that in my mitzvahs kalish adam dash ba'kev tishmon. If you're going to listen to the mitzvahs that are very easily trampled on, that a person steps on, it's the kind of mitzvah that a person doesn't really pay attention to. It's the kind of mitzvah that a person doesn't, is not mechazik in. If I tell you that, it was a very interessant school, a very interessant mitzvah, and everyone's going to get very excited about it. If there's a petach hamar in the corner, everyone's going to go running to see it. Huh? But if I tell you maybe you shouldn't talk in your tefillin, maybe you shouldn't be meseich das in your tefillin, maybe by the way there's a mezuzah on the door. How many times do you pass by a door without realizing that there's a mezuzah there, that there's even any shaykhis to some kind of kedusha every time you go in and out of a house? Think about it, huh? It's not that you're not being mekayim the mezuzah, but just you never thought about it. But what? It's brought down that the person should. Well, the reason why why is it there? Why is the mezuzah there altogether? It's to remind you that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is protecting us. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is watching over us. So look in the Torah. Look in the Torah in Yeridei and Hilchos Mezuzah. He's big arichas over there about what the milah of mitzvahs mezuzah is. He gives a very, very stark understanding of what's the pshat in the mitzvah of mezuzah. So he brings the Gemara with Unkelos, the famous Gemara by the Zara, that when Unkelos was leaving, he put his hand up by the door. So he asked him, "What's this?" She said, "You don't know. We keep a scroll here and it protects us." She says, "V'darach klal the shomer." The shomer is outside the house. Here we keep the shomer. Inside the house, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is different. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is a different way of being shomer us. But that's very much the story of Hilchos Mezuzah. But anyways, putting up the mezuzah. That's the mitzvah. But it's not there just to be there. It's there to think about it, that every time you go in and out of the house, you should think about. Also, look at the Rambam at the end of Hilchos Mezuzah. The Rambam has arichas there too. The Rambam says that the pshat is because that we should recognize that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is shomer tzeiseinu v'yenu. That's what it's all about. Yeah. So it was a person who was moving, and they asked the mover to take all the things out of the house, to pack them up and to go. And he comes back an hour later, and he sees a whole bunch of mezuzah cases on the table. He sees all his mezuzah cases around the table. So he asked the guy. He says, "Well, what's this?" He says, "I don't know. I couldn't read the instructions, so I threw them out." Yeah, that's what it was. So why am I talking about this concept of shmiras hamitzvahs as an anticipation to be mekayim the mitzvahs? Because the pasuk starts with v'haya. We know from the Gemara, we know from other places that v'haya ein v'haya l'lashon simcha. That the ikar mahalach and kiyum mitzvahs, and the ikar, one of the biggest yisaidis in Yiddishkeit is not just to be b'simcha, but to realize that when you do a mitzvah, that should bring a person tremendous simcha. And that's what v'hoya eikav tishmon is coming to teach us. And that's what the Aruch HaKadosh is talking about. V'yisbar al derech oimram ein v'hoya elo simcha. That this is the v'hoya is coming to teach us that we should do these mitzvahs b'simcha. V'hinei adayin hanavim ba b'noyam devar v'lahar b'musar noyam. Says the adayin hanavim Moshe Rabbeinu is coming to give us a shtickle musar, but he's doing it in a very pleasant way. Ki ein la'adam l'smayach ela k'sheyishmar lasos es kol asher tiva Hashem lasos. The ikar simcha, and the only simcha really that a person should have, is when he's able to be shomer the mitzvahs. As we spoke, that it's not physically possible for a person to be mekayim all the mitzvahs. And we spoke two mahalachim how a person is able to be mekayim the mitzvahs. But over here, the pshat is that once a person is masik, once a person gets to the point where he understands how he could be mekayim the other mitzvahs, let's say. Or let's say a person gets to the point where he's able to recognize that, oh, there's a mitzvah here that I haven't been doing properly, and I'm dash ba'akevav, and now I have a chance to fix it, to be mechazik in it. So then, that's what's going to bring a person tremendous simcha. That's when a person will find a tremendous amount of simcha. He says, until a person figures out the mahalach how to be mekayim all the mitzvahs, a person should always ask himself, well, the simcha maza oisa, like Shlomo Melech says in Koheles, what's the great simcha about? Meaning that the true simcha comes about through kiyum mitzvahs, and that's the concept of simcha. An interesting thing, Rabbi Yehuda Chassid writes in Sefer Chassidim. The Chofetz Chaim brings it when the Chofetz Chaim talks about learning Seder Kachim. So the Chofetz Chaim was very big. It was very, very big in being mechazik and being ma'orer about Bias HaMashiach, Bechlal L'Krei Amunah, but befrat in Bias HaMashiach that we're holding an Ikvis of the Mashiach. There's lashon of Eikav also, which doesn't mean the footsteps of Mashiach as we commonly hear as children, but Ikvis of the Mashiach means that the Eikav is the lowest part of the body, and it has very, very little hergish. There's, the Gemara actually talks about the times where the soldiers, they would cut off part of they would like shave off part of the heel of the foot, so that they would numb the nerves, so that they would be able to run on rocks and be able to run on the hard ground, and it wouldn't hurt them because they wouldn't feel it. And that's what they used to do 2,000 years ago, Okay, but anyways, I'll upon him. The Akev is the pshat. The Ikvis is the Mashiach means that we're holding at the lowest point. We're holding at the lowest point before Mashiach is coming. If we look at the earlier generations, if we look at the Hishtalshelus of the Zmanim Bechlal as a body, as a guf, that like the beginning of time was the head, and Mashiach is going to come, like when we're by the feet, right? So that's Ikvis of the Mashiach. We're holding by the lowest point, by the Akev. That's a good idea to know. But Zaktar Chaim HaKadosh, that the pshat is that only when a person's mekayim the mitzvahs properly. But it sounds like he's saying an akudah here based on what we were saying. So I'm getting back to what Rabbi Yehuda Chassid writes in Sefer Chassidim. He says, Amal, you'll find that there's a mitzvah that's like a meis mitzvah. We know the halacha is that a meis mitzvah, if you see a dead body lying on the floor, you have to bury him right then and there. You don't take him to Kvura. You bury him right then and there, and you put up a matzeva there, and whatever it is. And Rabbi Yehuda Chassid says that sometimes we'll find a mitzvah or a chelik in Torah that's very, very forgotten, that's very, very lost, and we should do our best to be mechazik that in that inyan, and it'll be like we were mekayim the meis mitzvah. But obviously, Torah is not meis. Torah is Torah Chaim, and mitzvahs are also give a person chiyus. So obviously, when a person is going to be mekayim these mitzvahs, he's going to be bringing a tremendous chiyus into the world, into his neshama, into the oylamis of whatever tikkunim happen whenever he does these mitzvahs. And the Rabbi Yehuda Chassid says, l'mashal, like Seder Kachim. Seder Kachim wasn't popularly learned. It's interesting because even Bizman Gemara, the Gemara says that Reiv the limud that they used to learn in those days was Seder Nezikin. It was almost like Yeshiva. You think Yeshiva Masechta is an Ayazach, Nashim Nezikin. In those days, they learned Reiv Tenuyei Ben Nezikin Hava. Most of what they learned was in Seder Nezikin, Baba Kama, Baba Masih, Baba Basra, etc. Sanhedrin, like we're learning, right? But that's very stark what they would learn. So the Mefarshim in Brachas on Daf Chav try to figure out, why that was. The Pashtus is because the Gemara says at the end of Bava Basra that this chelik in Torah is like a Mayin HaMizgaber, and there's a lot. What's very interesting is that when it comes to Shulchan Aruch of Orach Chaim in Yeridea, it's very pashut. You want to know, is this mutter to do on Shabbos? Is this also to do on Shabbos? Is this pot kosher? Is this pot treif? How do I fix this pot? Is my tefillin kosher? Or do I have to say al v'yavai? Do I not say al v'yavai? It's very straightforward halachas. When it comes to Chesed Mishpat, many times the person himself is going to be the one to decide what halacha is going to be. So it's a very interesting kind of. There's no in the Chesed Mishpat. Many times there's no clear-cut answers, and we are given the opportunity. Us Bnei Adam are given the opportunity to figure out what halacha is. And that's interesting because that's called mishpatim. That's what the pasuk says here also. Those mitzvahs are referred to as mishpatim. But when it comes to Hilchos Kachim, when it comes to the halachas of karbonis, so the Chofetz Chaim was saying, if Mashiach is going to come tomorrow, if Mashiach is going to come one of these days, you can have any clue how to bring a carbon. Do you know the difference between a oila and a mincha? Or how many days you could eat a shlama versus how many days you can eat a chatas? Can you eat a chatas? What animals do you bring on the Mizbeach? What do you do? Right? So the Chofetz Chaim held very stark that every kohen for sure needs to spend time learning these halachas. And he made a big movement. And in the Kuntras Torah Or that Chofetz Chaim wrote, and he talks about this way he puts his big focus on learning kachim, and he says that he quotes this Rabbi Yehuda Chassid, and he talks about, could you imagine the simcha? Imagine you have a chelik in Torah that's sitting in the mamish in the Karen's office, forgotten about, right? And all of a sudden, imagine they find the new kever of some new rebbe somewhere in Europe. Oh, everybody's going to make a whole situation. Yeah, it's going to be gavaldik, more nesiyas, more yortzites, more kugel. It's going to be great, right? But you have chalakim in Torah that aren't being learned, and you have mitzvahs that were not being mekayim properly. So what's fascinating was like this: when Rameir Shapiro created Daf Yomi, part of the cheshbon was that now there's not going to be a blot on Shas and nobody's going to learn. If you're going to finish Shas every 7 years, right? You're going to learn Kachim. Okay, Israel and Taurus, not Mamish going to learn, but all the Masechtas that you never thought you would touch before, now you're learning them. And just like all the Magidei Shir that are making their Rash with their Daf Yomi Shurim are learning Nashim Nezikin, like the Gemara says, because Rav Tanuya ben Nezikin, so too they're learning Kachim, and they're learning all the other Masechtas that they never thought that they would learn. They never got a chance to learn in Yeshiva. And it brings a gewalt. And he said, could you imagine the simcha that they're being piled in Shemayim when these people are going to come? When these people are going to come up to Shemayim, the Masechtas that were never learned, they're going to greet them with Hazah Simcha because these Masechtas were sitting collecting dust for who knows how many years, and now it's just as popular as learning the other Masechtas. And Rabbi Yehuda Chassid is saying the same thing that applies to mitzvahs. There are times when there are mitzvahs that we know, we keep them on a daily basis, so we know what they are, right? Maybe it's a halach and Shulchan Aruch that we're not too familiar with, right? And someone brings it to our attention. So we should grab these opportunities to find these mitzvahs and it'll bring. See, it's not just that it'll give us simcha in this world, but it creates a tremendous simcha in Allah Olam. Ubefrat, when a person is going to come up to Shemayim, when a person's Hashem is going to go up, he's going to greet them. The Chofetz Chaim writes in Shmiras Haloshen, B'Shem the Svarim HaKadoshim, I believe he brings it from Rav Chaim Vital, that a person has Ramach Evarim and Shasa Gidim, 248 Evarim and 365 Gidim. The Ramach Mitzvah Sasei are connected to the Ramach Evarim, and the Shasa Mitzvah Sasei are connected to the Gidim. And the 613 altogether, a person is made up of 613 parts. And he says the following, he says when a person does a mitzvah, so he says the same way that we have 613 parts in our guf, we also have the same exact thing in our neshama. And when we do a mitzvah with that part of our guf, it brings a certain it brings a certain light, a spiritual light to that part of the neshama. So he talks about if a person does an avera, so it brings a certain chayshach to that part of the person's guf, and it causes it to that part of the person's neshama, and it brings a tremendous tsar over there, and it's a terrible. He's talking about how terrible it is to talk lashon hara, and dibur befrat is much more damaging because it's much more powerful, because it's much more ruchnius involved in it. But the pshat is pashut that if chas v'shalom person in a car accident and he hurts his foot, can't walk for 6 weeks. And then when he finally starts working, he's got to go to a little therapy and fix his foot up a little bit. And then Baruch Hashem, a couple of months later, he's able to dance by a chassan of his design. He feels so much better, not because his foot's feeling better because it actually feels good, but he feels better as a person that he's able to function a lot better. So shtal zechvar, when a person is mekayim the mitzvahs properly, what is neshama is feeling? How much simcha he's bringing to his neshama? How much simcha he's bringing to his how much he's bringing into the chelik of his neshama that he's being mayor, that he's bringing this gewaldige ruchnius digalai to when he's being mekayim that mitzvah. He's feeling so much better. When the simcha is going to come about when you listen to when you're doing these mitzvahs. Pirush ekev hu soifet tachlos. Ekev means the end and the tachlos and the goal and the reason why we're doing something. Kederach shamasinu shamishtamshem chazal b'lashon zeh b'lashon hamishna be'ikvais meshicha. Says that we find this lashon that Chazal used. The Gemara says at the end of Saita, the Mishnah says at the end of Saita, be'ikvais meshicha. Ki be'gemaris man b'yasa yikra ikvais. The time before he comes, that's going to be called ikvais. Kameikin omar ekev tishmur samishpatim mishmartim asisem oz huz man simcha v'chol shlei higil lezeh ein lei makom l'smayach. Ukamamar chasida Yisrael Shaporish evloi believe it's halose al panav. Ki ein nachin l'smayach mishu asid lamed bebusha uklim l'fnei melech hagadol ואין צורך לומר משום מחויב ראשי למלך, וכפי זה שיר עקב הוא סייף שמיעס כל המשפטים. So I just read a couple of lines over here, but there's a lot packed in here. Let's try to unpack what he's saying over here. Says he's just coming to explain that the lashon of Akev means a sefer tachlis. Akev means a goal, and the reason for something. So he says like this: why are we being besimcha when we're doing mitzvahs? Because that's what our goal is. That's what the point is. If a person doesn't have a goal, he's just rolling around he's just running around like a bunch of mice. Yeah, he has no goal in life. So what is he? He doesn't have any direction. He doesn't know where he should be going, what he should do. Every single yid has a tachlis. His tachlis is, we're speaking over here, is to be mekayim the mitzvahs, to try to jam in as many mitzvahs as he can throughout his life. And on top of that, we just spoke now that a person should try to do mitzvahs that are forgotten mitzvahs. Bring it, like the Chavetz Chaim brought the limud of Seder Kachim, we brought it to life. And he revived, he gave a tchias hamesim mamish to that chelik in Torah. Right? Let's talk about nowadays. Nowadays, there's many people learning Yerushalmi. 100 years ago, there was a big movement to learn Yerushalmi also. But before that, people didn't learn Yerushalmi. They knew, but it wasn't a thing for the Hamoin Am that people should learn. Just like people didn't learn every Masechta. People who touched Yerushalmi, it was one of those things that sat on the shelf. Yeah? If you have an art scroll Yerushalmi, there's nothing stopping you from learning it, right? So just learn it. It's a big deal. So, once a person is mekayim the mitzvahs, and he's finished being mekayim the mitzvahs, so simcha comes from a sense of fulfillment. Yeah? When you have a raise it fund for your yeshiva or whatever it is, when you make that goal of $10 million or whatever it is, when the oilam is jumping for joy when they made the goal, what are you so happy about? That money's not going to your pocket. What are you so happy about? The pshat is because you made a goal and now you accomplished it. What do you say? Your yeshiva doesn't do it. And they made the money, they're nachnish. They did. Okay, good. And until a person gets to that goal, he can't be besimcha because he didn't get there yet. He's halfway there. He's 3/4 of the way there. That's not enough for him to be besimcha. K'maymer Chasidei Yisrael, he quotes from the Chavis Halavavas and Shara Prishus. Shehaparush evlei belibay v'tzahalosei befonov. This is a very famous line from the Chavis Halavavas and Shara Prishus. A parush is somebody who's detached from Hanoisei Lomazeh, and he's focused on Avodas Hashem, he's focused on Kedusha, he's focused on Torah Mitzvahs, he's focused on Heilig Zachim. But he knows deep down, or maybe not so deep down, just in the, he knows himself personally, that he's not really holding on Azam Madrega that he would like to be holding on, and he's not holding on a Madrega that people make him out to be. But you'll never see these people walking around being sad. Yeah? One of the things that you'll find by Kemat, I would say all, Gedolei Yisrael, and the Tzaddikim and Talmidei Chachamim, from all generations, was their constant attitude of Simcha. So it comes from many things. But let's focus on what we're talking about now. What we're focusing on now is that because they were very, very driven by specific goals of what the Torah and what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted from them. So you can't be besimcha if you don't have that. You don't know which way you're going. You don't know which team you're on. Imagine you want to play basketball. And they say, and before you figure out which team you're on, so you can shoot for that team, you can shoot for the other team. It's not going to help you if you shoot for the other team. It's going against your own things. It doesn't help you. So a person has to be driven by a goal. A person has to know what his tachlis is. A person has to know that his tachlis is to be mekayim all the mitzvahs, and only then he can be b'simcha. So what's he saying over here? Shahaparush evloi belibay. The morning is in his heart, but tzahalasei b'fanav. But the simcha, the tzahala, is on his face, meaning his happiness shines from his face. Ki ein nochen l'smayach mishu osed lamed bebusha klim l'fnei hamelech hagadol. So we all know that after 120 we're going to be facing the big king with the judgment, and we're going to have to give a din v'cheshbon on every ma'aseh that we did of our whole entire life. So, if we think about this a little bit, it's not going to make us too happy. We get very scared off. The big boogeyman up there is very scary with the bezdin, and they make all kinds of scary noises, and all kinds of bad malachim are going to be there, and all kinds of, hopefully some good malachim also going to be there, But the pshat is that if a person thinks about that he's also litin din v'cheshbon, he's not going to make him so happy. The Gemara says, the Gemara says that la'olam, a person should be misgaber yetzer tov yetzer hara. If that works, good. Im nitzchay mutav, im lav yasik b'teirav. Im lav yikar krishra, im lav yasik lo yom hamis. They should remind them of the day of judgment. Parshas means that you should think about the din v'cheshbon that you're going to get when you come up to Shemayim after 120. So what kind of simcha is that going to bring you? Fakert, it's going to make you sad, right? We spoke yesterday that the Pshat spoke to Babit, that there's a difference between being serious and being sad. Sad is atzvus that brings all kinds of yetzaharas, that brings all kinds of bad things. But a person's serious and he makes it in becheshbon, so then that's fakert. It's hard, it's difficult, and it may make a person sad for the moment, but then he knows what his goals are, and he picks himself up and he goes weiter. Just to be medai quickly in the lashon of the Gemara doesn't say yazkir yom hamisa, you should remember the day of death. That's not what it says. It says yazkir lo yom hamisa. You tell the Yetzirah, one day you're going to be dead. One day you're not going to have any power over me whatsoever. As I state to Maral, as I talk to Rebbeinu Sinai B'shitz, this is how many people learn the Pshat in the Gemara. Yazkir lo yom hamisa, you tell the Yetzirah, Mr. Yetzirah, remain calm. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Right now I'm busy. I can't deal with you right now. Yeah? So if you deal with Yetzirah like that, so you push him off. You keep on pushing him off, so it could be matzliach that way. So he says, how could you be besimcha when you have to stand in front of a melech gadol? Oh, so the pshat must be that if you fulfilled everything that the king ordered you to do, so you come back to the king and you can tell the king, I was mekayim everything that you did. Okay, Baruch Hashem. So then you get rewarded. And that's what's going to be. Ve'ein tzarich leimar, and it goes without saying, a person who has to give his head, the king is going to have his head. He's not going to be too happy, right? So the pshat is that the simcha has to come from the shleimus in the mitzvahs, in each mitzvah befrat, and in being mekayim targum mitzvahs collectively. Now, when a person does each mitzvah befrat, I want to give a little practical eitzah in kiyum mitzvahs over here. Let's take tefillin for example. It could really be any mitzvah, right? We want to know how we could be besimcha in doing this mitzvah, right? We want to know how we want to understand what this mitzvah is about. We want to understand how this mitzvah connects us to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So, there's something called Taimei HaMitzvahs, and that is the understanding of the reasons behind the mitzvahs. Now, there are issues with understanding the Taimei HaMitzvahs, and we spoke already at the beginning of the summer about this, that when it comes to be mekayim the mitzvahs, we have to be mekayim the mitzvahs in an oifen, just because that's kachi gzeres hamelach, that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, that's what we got to do. We don't ask questions. But there are times that there's nothing wrong with just learning up the sugyas, whether it's a Rashi and a Chumash, or whether it's a Ramban, or it's a Medrash, or it's a Gemara, right? There's so much to learn about each mitzvah on a very basic level that, people always ask, how should Shabbos be gishmak? How are you supposed to find the gishmak in davening? How are you supposed to find the gishmak in this? How are you supposed to find the gishmak in the mitzvahs? It's very, very pashut that if you have no idea what you're doing, you're just doing some funny kind of thing, right? You're just marching around your shul carrying a branch and a fruit. That does look very strange. And if you think about it like that, it is going to feel strange. You're not really going to be able to make sense out of it if that's how you're looking at it, right? So it's pashut to me that the way to understand mitzvahs is to learn the sugyas of the mitzvahs to understand them. I'm not talking about all the lumdas. I mean, if you want to do that, do that. That's for sure good. But on this very simple level, take out a chumash, read through the parsha of Daled Minim, read through the parashas of Tefillin, read Rashi, look at the Ramban. You'll get a sense of what's really happening. And then you'll say, oh, it's supposed to remind me about Yitzis Mitzrayim. By the way, a lot of mitzvahs are going to say, hey, one second, this is to remind me of Yitzis Mitzrayim, and that's going to remind me of Yitzis Mitzrayim. And you'll say, one second, well, what is Yitzis Mitzrayim? Yeah? So you'll learn about Yitzis Mitzrayim. You look at the Ramban and then the Parshas Bayit. It says that the reason for all the mitzvahs is that we should remember Yitzis Mitzrayim. Good morning. That's where it's at. That's what it's all about. Right? That's in a sense of each mitzvah by itself. Each mitzvah stands alone in how to be mekayim it. Mitzvah Sukkah. You have a whole Masechta dedicated to Mitzvah Sukkah. You have a whole Prakim and Shas dedicated to Mitzvah of Lulav. So instead of sitting there trying to feel connected to the mitzvah and how am I going to connect, and my neshama doesn't feel, No. There's no magic that all of a sudden your neshama is going to feel a lulav and understanding the kedusha of the lulav. Chances are it's not going to happen like that. You could make it understandable to yourself in the way that I'm telling you. And by the way, another very important way to understand mitzvahs, take care of Shulchan Aruch and learn how to do the mitzvahs properly. If all it is just a connection to my soul, to kedusha, to feeling happy, to feeling good, so where does halacha fit in? Halacha is very rigid. Halacha is very taxing. Halacha is going to be very not gishmak. But if you understand what the background is to the halachas, you understand the reason of why we're supposed to be doing this, that ultimately all of these things is to connect us to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Rambam says, the end of Hilchos Me'ilah, that the mitzvahs are 613 eitzes that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us that we can connect to Him. I go to somebody for an eitzah, right? I have a medical question, I have to go to somebody for an eitzah. I'd say, it's an opinion. I want to hear your opinion. A mitzvah is an opinion? Not really. I mean, we got to be mekayim the mitzvahs. So they wouldn't really have an option. We're a little bit mechuyev to do them. Yeah, a little bit more mechuyev than a little bit to do them. So what's the idea? But the pshat is that again, there are many different levels of kiyum mitzvahs. You can look at the mitzvahs as a suggestion. It's a nice thing. You want to connect Hashem, connection. You need that connection. Okay, fine. But then you can make the mitzvahs a chelik of your life. You can make the mitzvahs a chelik of very, very much you are. And that is the eitzah for you. And that's that's going to be your connection to the Eitz HaChaim. That's going to be your connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Again, we spoke before that mitzvah is milashon tzavsa. Tzavsa is a companionship, a relationship, a connection. That's why we're doing these mitzvahs. Because if the tachlis of everything is to connect HaKadosh Baruch Hu, by doing the mitzvahs, we're going to do that. And the point is that it has to be that every mitzvah. Imagine the king tells you that you have to find 10 stones that got lost, and you have to find them, and when you bring back all the stones, you'll get a great reward. That's the goal of the mitzvahs. Obviously, again, it's not so much about checking, okay, I did this, I did that, I did that thing, okay, I'm good. Okay, you sit with your feet up, waiting, okay, so in 6 months from now, it's Pesach, and then I'm going to have to eat matzah. Okay, I ate matzah, okay, good, check. Matzah, you're supposed to live it, you're supposed to understand it, you're supposed to go into your blood what matzah is about. Not the actual matzah. Learn about it. You should connect to the matzah, and you should understand why we're eating matzah. You should learn the sugyas and understand it to be able to appreciate what we're doing. It shouldn't be mitzvah hanashim melumada. You know what that means? Yeshaya Navi is giving Musa to Klal Yisrael, and he says, the problem is that you're doing mitzvahs hanashim melumada. You're doing things by rote. Yeah. A good example would be tefillin in the morning. Yeah. When you put on tefillin, you have to think about that HaKadosh Baruch Hu took us out of Mitzrayim. And that's why we're doing it. You thought about that? I'm not asking anybody specifically. I don't want to hear answers. I'm sure that all you did. Yeah? But, it's monkey business. The monkey see, monkey do. What are we doing? Right? Just think about it. It's not so difficult to think for 30 seconds, 10 seconds, before you put on your tefillin that this is what you're going to do. It's not so terrible. Okay. And I'll skip a little bit, I'll just say one more line. That's stated in passing in Tilm. V'omer v'hoya hasimcha tia ekev tishmun pirush ekev schar esek haTorah to samcheyu. Because of the schar esek haTorah, because of the schar that you're going to get, that's what's going to bring a person tremendous simcha. Because mitzvah gereres, mitzvah sheschar mitzvah, mitzvah shehi hasimcha. He's understanding the Mishnah here in Ovis. The schar mitzvah is the simcha shal mitzvah that's going to be born out of doing each mitzvah. That's what's going to be guide you to do the next mitzvah. Because if a person's happy, a person's in the right mindset, he doesn't mind doing another mitzvah. If you're grumpy and you're not in the mood, then you push it off. You'll grump about it. Mitzvahs are not to be grumbled about. They're supposed to be done with a gishmak. Yeah? Again, you'll go. Another very good way of getting inspiration, if you want to call that, go to a big person and watch how he does the mitzvahs. Yeah? Go to Chassidus Rebbe and watch how he does Nanuim on Sukkos. Go to Chassidus Rebbe or go to some big Rosh Hashiva and watch how he lights a menorah. You'll see that he's doing something that it doesn't look regular the way that he's doing it. He's involved in it. It's not just some, okay, I'll make a bracha, light it, then goodbye. That's not what it's. That's not what it's about. You gotta make it gishmak, make it alive, make it a matzah. All right. I think that's it for today. I think that's it for altogether. Let's